9/11 conspiracy theories. 9 theories are conspiracy theories that disagree with the widely accepted account that the September 11th attacks were perpetrated solely by Al-Qaeda, with detailed advanced knowledge on the part of any government agency. Proponents claim there were inconsistencies in the official conclusions or evidence that was overlooked. In a total of 17 countries, 1,063 people in 17 nations found majorities in only 9 countries believe Al-Qaeda was behind the attacks. 48 believed Al-Qaeda was responsible for the attacks. 15 believed the US government was responsible. 7 believed Israel was, and another 7% believed some other perpetrator, other than Al-Qaeda, was responsible. The poll were especially likely to name a perpetrator other than Al-Qaeda. The most is that the collapse of the Twin Towers and 7 World Trade Center were the result of a controlled demolition rather than structural failure due to fire. The Pentagon was hit by a missile launched by elements from inside the US government, or that a commercial airliner was allowed to do so via an effective stand-down of the American military. Conspiracy theorists for such actions include justifying the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq as well as geostrategic interests in the Middle East, pipeline plans launched in the early 1990s by UNOCL and other oil companies. Other around authorities having advance knowledge of the attacks and deliberately ignoring or helping to assist the attackers. The standards and technology, NIST, and outlets such as Popular Mechanics have investigated and rejected the claims made by 9/11's conspiracy theories. The system accepts that the impacts of jet aircraft at high speeds in combination with subsequent fires, controlled demolition, led to the Twin Towers. 9/11's conspiracy theories, the terms
main
and all refer to the revelations that the 9/11's Commission report, which integrated intelligence information from the earlier FBI investigation, PEOM, and inquiry of 2002, and the to building performance carried out by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. Organizations that support the accepted accounts such as those by the National Fire Protection Association, and scientists of Purdue University and Northwestern University. Articles appearing in magazines such as Popular Mechanics, American, and Time. Throughout the world, Times of India, the Canadian Casting Corporation, the BBC, and Deutsche, the Austrian Casting Corporation, and the Chibo of South Korea. U.S. 2009 speech to the Muslim world where he said,
I am aware by the events of 9/11, but killed nearly 3,000 people on that day.
These crashed United Airlines Flight 175 and American Airlines Flight 11 into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, and Kraken Airlines Flight 77 into the Pentagon. These caused the collapse of the Twin Towers and the destruction and damage of other buildings in the World Trade Center complex. The by the impact of the airliner and the resulting fire. The fourth plane into a field near Tanksville, after the passengers and flight crew attempted to regain control of the aircraft. The NIST concluded that pre-attack warnings of varying detail of the planned attacks against the United States by Al-Qaeda were ignored due to a lack of communication between various law enforcement and intelligence personnel. For the occasion, the report democratic inertia and laws passed in the 1970s to prevent abuses that caused scandals during that era. The report administrations with
failure.
Since of conspiracy theories have been put forward in websites, books, and many groups. 9/11's conspiracy theories identify as part of the 9/11's truth movement. Within a suggested on an internet chat room suggesting that the collapse of the towers looked like an act of controlled demolition.
If you not one of mentioned anything about the controlled demolition part. I think
the first primarily on various perceived anomalies in the publicly available evidence, and perhaps later developed more specific theories about an alleged plot. One alleged by email and on the web is that not a single Jew had been killed in the attack and that therefore the attacks must have been the work of the Mossad, not Israeli terrorists. The first appeared in Europe. 1 week. The theory by a researcher from the French National Center for Scientific Research published in Le Monde. Other corners of the globe within weeks. 6. Thierry May 9/11's expose l'effroyable imposture topped the French bestseller list. It's as 9/11's The Big Lie received attention, but it's one of the principal sources for
truth.
2000 of the CIA and September 11 by former German State Minister Andreas von Bülow and Operation 9/11 by the German journalist Gerhard Wisniewski, both books by Matthias Brockers, who was editor at the German newspaper Die Zeitung. While in Europe, they were treated by the US media with either bafflement or amusement, and dismissed by the US government as the product of anti-Americanism. On November 10, 2001, President George W. Bush denounced the emergence of
outlays, shift the blame away from the terrorists, themselves, away from
the 9 theories started out mostly in the political left but have broadened into what New York Magazine describes as
terror meet, few counter-cultural distrust with the Dante tread on me variety.
By conspiracies about the September 11 attacks began to gain ground in the United States. One popularity stemmed more from growing criticism of the Iraq War and the newly re-elected President George W. Bush than from any discovery of new or more compelling evidence or an improvement in the technical quality of the presentation of the theories. Revelations that weapons of mass destruction did not exist in Iraq, the bullet of the President's daily brief of August 6, 2001, and that NORAD had lied to the 9/11's Commission, may have fueled conspiracy theories. Between the anniversary of the September 11 attacks in 2006, main coverage of the conspiracy theories increased. The U.S. issued responses to the theories, including analysis by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, of the World Trade Center and a revised 2006 State Department webpage to debunk the theories. 8. Security strategy paper declared that terrorism springs from
misinformation,
and that
terror from populations whose information about the world is contaminated by falsehoods and corrupted by conspiracy theories. The distort and filter out facts that would challenge popular prejudices and self-serving propaganda.
Al-Qaeda's responsibility for the attacks, with Chief Ayman al-Zawahiri accusing Shia Iran and Hezbollah of denigrating Sunni successes in hurting America. By Israel carried out the attacks. Some of the September 11 attacks do not involve representational strategies typical of many conspiracy theories that establish a clear dichotomy between good and evil, or guilt. They call actions of negligence and complicity. An early of such theories, dismissed official account of the September 11th attacks as being itself a conspiracy theory that seeks
to dissent what is confusing
and
expel
just of the attacks. News outlets released a flurry of articles on the growth of 9/11's conspiracy theories, with an article stating that
on it is
questions about belief related to the September 11th attacks. An Ogby poll commissioned by 911truth.org found that 63.6% of Americans believe that Arab fundamentalists were responsible for 9/11s, while 26.4% believed that
certain knew the attacks were coming but consciously let them proceed for various political, military reasons.
And 4.
Actively planned or assisted some aspects of the attacks.
In 9/11 conspiracy theories topped a greatest conspiracy theory list compiled by the Daily Telegraph. Traction. Elizabeth Woodworth for the Center for Research concludes that the increased presence in mainstream media reflected an improved professional approach within the 9/11's truth movement. In 2000,
Internet studies
is said to be sympathetic to conspiracy theories, sued for the release of videos collected by NIST of the attacks and aftermath. According to Allgemeine Zeitung, the videos were published shortly before the 9th anniversary of the attacks provide
new foods
of 7 World Center, a paper in the vicinity of the WTC towers that also collapsed on September 11, 2001. Eyewitness explosions happening before the collapse of both of the towers, while consider these theories to be unreasonable. 9. Jones and Mike Berger have further added that the death of Osama bin Laden did not change their questions about the attacks, nor closure. The number of believers in 9/11's conspiracy theories has dipped, while the number of people who believe in the most theories within the government had at least some foreknowledge of the attacks and deliberately ignored them or actively weakened America's defenses to ensure the hijacked flights were not intercepted. That key planned the attacks and collaborated with Al-Qaeda them out. There is might have been achieved. Other September 11th attacks are not proposing specific theories, but straight that the U.S. government's account of the events is wrong. This would lead to a call for a new official investigation into the events of September 11, 2000. According to managing for comment at the Canadian newspaper National Post and author of the Among the Truthers, A Journey to America's Growing Conspiracist Underground.
They feel that the official theory of 9/11 is wrong. And then, convinced, then the public will rise up and demand a new investigation with government resources, and the investigation will tell us what actually happened.
An action by U.S. officials with foreknowledge was intended to ensure that the attacks took place successfully. Michael, former Environment Minister and member of Tony Blair's cabinet, has stated that the United States knowingly failed to prevent the attacks. Also, that the 9/11's conspiracy was considerably larger than the government claims, and that the entire 9/11's Commission report
is lie, that the story about 9/11 is true.
Suspect just
extra
amount of Airlines and American Airlines stocks. Authorities and conspiracy theorists continue to maintain that traders may have known in advance of the coming events of 9/11 and placed their bets accordingly. An study of insider trading on 9/11 concludes that a measure of lithium was also examined and seen to be at abnormally high levels in the days leading up to the attacks. The paper concludes that there is evidence of unusual option market activity in the days leading up to September 11 that is consistent with investors trading on advance knowledge of the attacks. Alan M. Podeshman, the journalist. On 11th, two airlines rise in their put-to-call ratio. These airlines and American Airlines, the two whose planes were hijacked on 9/11. Between the Chicago Options Exchange saw purchases of 4,744
put
versus 396 call options. More Chicago saw the purchase of 4,516 put options in American Airlines, the other involved in the hijackings. 148 call options in American purchased that day. No anomalies in their put-to-call ratio in the days leading up to the attacks. America had a major warning about possible losses. Anomalous trading activities as well, which did that its travelers insurance unit may pay $500 million in claims from the World Trade Center attack, had about 5 times the normal volume during 3 trading days before the attack for options that profit if the stock falls below $40. Citigroup 25 cents in late trading to $38.09. Morgan 22 floors at the World Trade Center experienced bigger than normal pre-attack trading of options that profit when stock prices fall. Other companies by the tragedy had similar jumps. Raytheon's contractor had a high number of call options trading on September 10. If shares are more than $25 each had 232 options contracts traded on the day before the attacks, almost times the total number of trades that had occurred before that day. The initial at least 2 brokerage firms, NFS, a area of Fidelity Investments, and Waterhouse. It was traders would have realized a $5 million profit. The Station launched an insider trading investigation in which Osama bin Laden was a suspect after receiving information from at least one Wall Street firm. A conspiracy theorists is that the American Aerospace Defense Command, NOR, issued a sound order or deliberately scrambled fighters late to allow the hijacked airplanes to reach their targets without interference. According to ND had the capability of locating and intercepting planes on 9/11, and its to do so indicates a government conspiracy to allow the attacks to occur. The web s-clothes.com argues that the U.S. military failed to do their job. R. Elzes says,
there is this down on 9/11.
In September, D. generals said they learned of the hijackings in time to scramble fighter jets. The government released tapes claiming to show the Federal Aviation Agency, FAA, told the military about the hijackings until 3 of the 4 planes had crashed, a fact indicate that the FAA repeatedly lied to other U.S. government agencies. Phillips explained that it is neither quick nor easy to locate and intercept a plane behaving erratically. The hijackers turned off or disabled the onboard radar transponders. Without the identify the airplanes, the hijacked planes would have been only blips among 4,500 other blips on NORAD's radar screens, make it very difficult to track. According 14 fighter jets were on alert in the contiguous 48 states on 9/11. The civilian air traffic controllers to alert NORAD. A hijacked in the U.S. since 1979.
They had dial us.
Public officer for NORAD. Only civilian plane was intercepted in the decade prior to 9/11, 1 hour and 22 minutes. Rules and 11th barred flight on intercepts. Before all other ORAD interceptions were limited to offshore air defense identification zones, AD.
Until now, ADIZ
says Oman. The FNORAD increased cooperation. They manned centers while NORAD increased its fighter coverage and installed radar to watch airspace over the continent. According to the full 9/11s and Osama bin Laden, a book about published in 2011, the long NORAD received of the hijackings was some 8 minutes for American Airlines Flight 11, the hijacked. The AD to the hijacked Flight 175 at just about the same time it was crashing into the World Trade Center's South Tower. The AD of the missing not hijacked Flight 77 3 minutes before it struck the Pentagon. NOR hijack of United Flight 93 until 3 minutes after it had crashed in Pennsylvania. It has been may have had foreknowledge of the attacks. 4 hours. The F arrested 5 Israelis who had been filming the smoking skyline from the roof of a white van in the parking lot of an apartment building. 4.
Puzzling.
The Israelis and bystanders said they acted in a suspicious manner.
They were like, no. They didn't.
While the Jewish news magazine reported that the FBI concluded that 2 of the men were Israeli intelligence operatives, a spokesman for the Israeli embassy in the United States said that they had not been involved in any intelligence operation in the United States. The FBI said that the 5 Israelis had no foreknowledge of the attacks. Fires caused the collapse of the World Trade Center. Conspiracy theories say the collapse of the North Tower, or World Trade Center was caused by explosives installed in the buildings in advance. Brigham Young University physicist Stephen E. Jones, Art Richard Gage, software engineer Jim Hoffman, and theologian Ray Griffin, that the aircraft impacts and resulting fires could not have weakened the buildings sufficiently to initiate a catastrophic collapse, and that the building could not have collapsed completely, nor at the speed that they did, without energy involved to weaken their structures. In the article,
covered in dust from the 9/11's World Trade Center catastrophe,
which is Physics Journal, author Herod of the University of Copenhagen's Department of Chemistry, error of Brigham Young University's Department of Physics and Astronomy, Stephen, and that thermite and nanothermite composites in the dust and debris were found following the collapse of the 3 buildings, which they could be proof that explosives brought down the buildings. The article and the editor-in-chief of the Public subsequently resigned. Joe, the amount of explosive needed to do this could have been positioned in the 2 buildings without drawing attention, but men researched the building's maintenance activity in the weeks prior to the event. National Institute of Standards and Technology state that enormous quantities of thermite would have to be applied to the structural columns to damage them, but Jones did this, saying, and others were investigating. Author of
in America,
who stated questions about the viability of Jones' theories remain unanswered. fact that no demolition personnel noticed any telltale signs of thermite during the 8 months of debris removal following the tower's collapse. Blanchard's chain of possession needs to be established for the tested beams, which did not occur with the beams Jones tested, raising. NG pieces tested could have been cut away from the debris pile with acetylene torches, shears, or potentially contaminated equipment while on site, or to trace amounts of thermite or other compounds while being handled, while in storage, or being transferred from ground zero to memorial sites. And steel found in the rubble was evidence of explosives, as an ordinary airplane fire would not generate enough heat to produce this. Photographs of red debris being removed by construction equipment, but black. If there had been any molten steel in the rubble, any excavation equipment encountering it would have been immediately damaged. Other tests by United States Geological Survey and R.J. Lee did not report any evidence of thermite or explosives. It has found. Dave Tom magazine, noting the residue in question was claimed to be thermitic because of its iron oxide and aluminum composition. Point substances are found in many items common to the towers. Cut through a vertical steel beam, special temperature containment must be added to prevent the molten iron from dropping down, and thermite reaction is practically used in building demolition. Tom Ventura hired New Mexico Tech to conduct a demonstration showing nanothermite slicing through a large steel beam. The thermite produced copious flame and smoke but no damage to the beam, even was in a horizontal, and their optimal position. The NIST and technology, NIST, concluded version was more than sufficient to explain the collapse of the buildings. NIST to debate conspiracy theorists because they feel it would give these theories unwarranted credibility. Special physics and structural engineering accept the model of a fire-induced gravity collapse of the World Trade Center buildings without the use of explosives. As NIST did not perform a test for the residue of explosive compounds of any kind in the debris. Media sources published that the towers had collapsed due to melted steel. Knowledge of jet fuel would not melt the steel support structure of the WTC contributed to the belief among skeptics that the towers would not have collapsed without external interference, something than the planes. NIST melted, but rather weak steel, together damage caused by the plane's impacts, collapses. NIST model based on the assumption that combustible vapors burned immediately upon mixing with the incoming oxygen showed that
at any duration, temperatures near 1000 degrees C was about 15 to 20 minutes. The temperatures were 500 degrees C or below.
The U.S. administration deliberately chose not to shoot down a plane that was heading for the Pentagon, contend that no plane hit the Pentagon at all. Other than Flight 77 hit the Pentagon, but the World Trade Center towers were destroyed by controlled demolition, said Hoffman, whose web 91view.com cites of the
No Boeing
claims. Political and filmmaker Dylan Avery claimed that American Airlines Flight 77 did not crash into the Pentagon. In the Pentagon was hit by a missile launched by elements from inside the U.S. government. One.org says that the holes in the Pentagon walls were far too small to have been made by a Boeing 757.
How does feet wide and 155 feet long fit into a hole which is only 60 feet across?
Maison Froyable Imposture, published in English as 9/11ths. The Big Lie, became a bestseller in France and is available in more than a dozen languages. The book, criticized by both the mainstream French and American press, and later, from within the 11th Truth movement by researchers such as Jim Hoffman and websites such as oilempire.us. The called the book.
Allegations. Entire foundation.
Theorists' claim of a missile hitting the Pentagon meets. A professor of engineering at Purdue University argues that
a crash-like outline of itself into a reinforced concrete building. When Pentagon, one wing, the other was sheared off by the Pentagon's load-bearing columns.
The Pentagon took relatively little damage from the impact was because Wedge 1 had recently been renovated. This program, which had been begun in the 1980s, and was the first of 5 to be renovated. Conspiracy theorists' claim of a missiles hitting the Pentagon have been described by researchers within the 9/11 Truth movement, such as Hoffman, in his essay.
What evidence shows.
And by role of other conspiracies in the attacks. The evidence includes airplane debris including Flight 77's black boxes, the lander, an airplane, and a cockpit seat were observed at the crash site. The remaining 77 were indeed found at the Pentagon crash site and their identities confirmed by DNA analysis. Many like the Pentagon. 77 passengers made phone calls reporting that their airplane had been hijacked. For example, passenger Renee May called her mother to tell her that the plane had been hijacked and that the passengers had been herded to the back of the plane. Another called our Solicitor General Theodore Olson, and the flight had been hijacked, and that the hosts had knives and box cutters. Some of the phone calls the passengers made were fabricated by voice morphing, the passengers disposed of, and appeared at the Pentagon. The public filed a Freedom of Information Act request on December 15, 2004 to force the government to release video recordings from the Sheraton National Hotel, the Citgo gas station, security cameras and the Virginia Department of Transportation. On 2000, the government released the Pentagon security camera videos to judicial watch. Video shows American Airlines Flight 77 crashing into the Pentagon. The image of American Airlines Flight 77 which appears in the videos has been described as
a white
and by
a thin
by the and
a
in the wash. One of the videos already appeared in the media in 2002. The new video does not answer their questions. The 4/11 United Airlines Flight 93 crashed in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The passengers revolted. Out of the Flight 3 was the only one not to reach its target. Theories surrounding this event is that Flight 93 was actually shot down by a U.S. fighter jet. David Ray that large parts of the plane including the main body of the engine landed miles away from the main wreckage site, too far for an ordinary plane crash. Usually leave a small debris field when they crash, and that this is compatible with reports of wreckage found farther away from the main crash site. Claimed that the main body of the engine was found miles away from the main wreckage site with damage comparable to that which a heat-seeking missile would do to an airliner. According to the plane shot down by the government because passengers had found out about the alleged plot. According to the magazine,
this claim assertions that the main body of the engine and other large parts of the plane turned up miles from the main wreckage site to have resulted from an ordinary crash. This because found only 300 yards from the main crash site. Location was consistent with the direction in which the plane had been traveling.
Michael, airline accident expert who investigated the crash of TWA Flight 800 in 1996, says that, at very high velocities of 500 mph or more, it would take a few seconds to move or tumble across the ground for 300 yards. Reports in Lake by local residents are accurate. CNN reporters found debris from the crash at least 8 miles away from the crash site, including Baltimore. However, this is all very light material that the wind would have easily blown away. A Post-Get article from September 14, 2001 describes the material as
most
and an
indoor.
The state agent Bill Crowley that
Lighter debris probably shot into the air on the heat of a fireball that witnesses said shot several hundred feet into the air after the jetliner crashed. Then, probably that was blowing southeast at about 9 mph.
The crash site and Indian Lake was misreported in some accounts. In a line, India just over a mile from the crash site. The road round Utah, accounting for the erroneous reports. Some believe a small white jet seen flying over the crash area may have fired a missile to shoot down Flight 93. However, agencies such as the FBI assert this small plane was a Dassault Falcon business jet asked to descend to an altitude of around 1,500 feet to survey the impact. Ben, who was operation manager on September 11, 2001, said military aircraft were near Flight 93. Such change, Flight 93 safely landed in Ohio, and the plane was involved in the crash in Pennsylvania. News report that Flight 93 landed at a Cleveland airport. It learned that Delta Flight 1989 was the plane confused with Flight 93, and the report acted as inaccurate. Several of Truth Movement dispute this claim, citing at the scene, testimony, and the of secretly substituting one plane for another, and such
Hoax theories appear calculated to alienate victims, survivors, and the larger public from the 9/11 Truth Movement.
The editor rebuttal to the claims. Valencia, a local woman who took the only photograph of the mushroom cloud from the impact of Flight 93 seconds after it hit the ground, harassed over the telephone and in person by conspiracy theorists, who claimed the photo. The County authorities, the Smithsonian, and the Park Service's Flight 93 National Memorial staff have all examined the photograph as well as the film negatives, and they consider the photo to be authentic. While claimed that passengers of Flight 93 and or Flight 77 were, or that they were relocated, with the they never be found, others with 9/11's Truth Movement, Hoffman and Scholars for 9/11's Truth and Justice, such claims. Hijack. See all hackers in the September 11 attacks and blocked Al-Qaeda investigations. During the immediate aftermath of the 9/11's attacks, the BBC the names and identities of what they believed to be some of the hijackers. Some were discovered to be alive, a fact upon by 9/11's conspiracy theorists as proof that the hijackings were faked. The BBC fusion may have arisen because the names they reported back in 2001 were common Arabic and Islamic names. In BBC, the FBI said that it was confident to have identified all 19 hijackers, and that the other inquiries had raised the issue of doubt about their identities. They acknowledged these as cases of mistaken identity. According to the former editor of Arab News in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, The only public information about the hijackers was a list of names issued by the FBI on September 14, 2001. When 4 days after the cited reports on September 27, the misentities were quickly resolved. According
All of it prevailed during the first few days following the attack. What were identical names?
Sadly, the two of the allegedly surviving attackers, Samdi and Walid al-Shari, are
As United States or Great Britain.
According to the chair of the Defense Commission,
Gotten into the United States in any way at all because there was something wrong with their visas, wrong with their passports. They should border. That obvious people had been stopped, there had been a plot.
Khalid Hashmi had both been identified as Al-Qaeda agents by the CIA, but that was not shared with the FBI or U.S. immigration, so both were able to legally enter the U.S. to prepare for the 9/11 attacks. Others may have received training at U.S. military facilities. The defense at 3 of the hijackers, Mohammed Atta, Aziz al-Omuri and Saeed al-Ghamdi,
have the American military schools.
The International Officers School at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama, and Aziz al-Omuri went to the Aerospace Medical School at Brooks Air Force Base in Texas, and al-Ghamdi was at the Defense Language Institute at the Presidio in Monterey, California. They are within the Pakistani Inter-Services Intelligence, ISI, played an important role in financing the attacks. There are foreign intelligence agencies, such as Israeli Mossad, had foreign attacks, and Arabia may have played a role in financing the attacks. A former ISI believes were an inside job originating in the United States, perpetratorial or neoconservatives. French, former of Italy from 1985 until his 1992 resignation over Operation Gladio, said that knowledge among the Italian center left that the 9/11 attacks were a joint operation of the CIA and the Mossad. Sub that he did not actually believe this. Commented by the Anti-Defamation League, others is that the State of Israel was involved in the attacks, and them to cause states to attack enemies of Israel, to divert attention away from Israel's treatment of Palestinians, to help take control of world affairs, and to persuade Americans to support Israel. The attack was organized by Ariel Sharon, or the God of Israel. Kevin Barry, University of Wisconsin, is a leading advocate for the theory that Mossad orchestrated the attacks. That Jewish employees were forewarned by Israeli intelligence to skip work on September 11, no Jewish deaths at the World Trade Center. Some conspiracy theorists put this number as high as 4,000 Jewish people skipping work. September 17 by the Lebanese Hezbollah-owned satellite television channel Al Manar and is believed to be based on the September 12 edition of the Jerusalem Post that stated,
has so far received the names of 4,000 Israelis believed to have been in the areas of the World Trade Center and the Pentagon at the time of the attacks.
The number is variously estimated at between 270 and 400. The lower percentage of Jews living in the New York area and partial surveys of the victims listed religion. The U.S. a partial list of 76 in response to claims that fewer Jews/Israelis died in the WTC attacks than should have been present at the time. 5. Attack. British Anthony Summers and Robin Swan claimed in their 2011 book The 11th Hour that the Saudi royal family provided material and financial support to the hijackers and that the Bush administration covered this up as well as their own incompetence. The author movement helped this cover-up by deflecting attention away from these actions. In 11, Saudi Arabia demanding the repayment of £136 million it paid out to victims of the 9/11 attacks. A number of companies and banks as well as a leading member of the Al Saud royal family were accused of being
agents
for the
knowingly
providing encouraged anti-Western sentiment.
No plane
Promoted like 911 Taboo, a search shot of the second impact, news helicopter, depicts the opposite of a Boeing 767 accidentally appearing from behind a layer mask. Economist within the Labor Department under the Bush administration, Morgan, argued planes were used in the attacks. Reynolds possible that the Boeing planes of Flights 11 and 175 could have penetrated the steel frames of the towers, and that depositing was used to depict the plane crashes in both news reports and subsequent amateur video.
There were hackers.
Reynolds.
I know, I'm out of dream. But that's the the only surrounded by holograms made to look like planes. Watch footage of a cigar-shaped missile hitting the World Trade Center.
Have repeatedly refuted the claims. Been banned from certain conspiracy theory websites while advocates have been sometimes threatened with violence by PO. Story websites. Cover up. They detect a pattern of behavior on the part of officials investigating the September 11 attack meant to suppress the emergence of evidence that might contradict the accepted account. Paul's book, The Hidden, November 9, 2001, states debris from Ground Zero was removed without a proper forensic investigation. According to the report, the cockpit recorders, CVR, flight data recorders, FR, or
black boxes.
175 were not recovered from the remains of the WTC attack. However, two men, Mike and Nicholas DeMasi, who extensively in the wreckage of the World Trade Center, stated in a book Behind the Scenes, Ground Zero that they helped federal agents find 3 of the 4
black
from the at federal agents around the site to search for the black boxes from the planes. We were getting top of the stairs at the Brooks Brothers entrance area. We loaded worth of equipment and strapped it into the ATV. There are boxes. According to the report, both black from Flight 77 and both black boxes from Flight 93 were recovered. However, Flight 77 was said to be too damaged to yield any data. On April 2002, the FBI allowed the families of victims from Flight 93 to listen to the voice recordings. In April, a transcript of the CVR was released as part of the Zacarias Moussaoui trial. Ben Main videos Ben Laden. Audio and videotapes were released in the years following the 9/11 attacks that were reported to be from Osama bin Laden. In the responsibility for the attacks. In 2001, known as the Jalalabad tape, the speaker is alleged to have foreknowledge of the attacks. The Senate claimed the tape was probably from Osama bin Laden. Some early people in the Muslim world doubt the authenticity of the tape. On December 2001, German channel House's translation of the videotape. Two Indian translators and an expert on Oriental studies found the White House's translation to be both inaccurate and manipulative.
At the most, held to prove the guilt of bin Laden, it is identical with the Arabic.
And that the knowledge cannot be heard at all in the original. Professor in Arabic Studies at the Asia-Africa Institute at the University of Hamburg, and translators who listened to the tapes and transcribed them apparently wrought a lot of ear, but that cannot be heard on the tape no matter how many times you listen to it. Some 11th Truth believe that the man in this videotape is not Osama bin Laden at all, citing in weight and facial features, along with wearing of a gold ring, which is by Muslim law, and with his right hand, although bin Laden was left-handed. In November 2007, also said to be from bin Laden, the speaker claimed sole responsibility for the attacks and denied the Taliban and the Afghan government or people had any prior knowledge of the attacks. Richard Anti-terrorism efforts in 2001 theorized the CIA director George Tenet ordered the agency to withhold information about Nawaf al-Hashmi and Khalid al-Mihdhar from the rest of the government in an effort to cover up the agency's recruitment of the two. George denying the agency deliberately withheld information about the pair and noted that Clark himself said he had no proof. Motives? Pax Americana. In 2000, members, scholars for 9/11's Truth argued that a group of U.S. neoconservatives called the Project for a New American Century, PNA, which included Paul Wolfowitz, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, set on world dominance and orchestrated the 9/11's attacks as an excuse to hit Iraq, Afghanistan and later Iran. In September, he released a strategic treatise entitled Rebuilding America's Defenses. 2004 book The New Pearl Harbor, disturbed questions about the Bush administration and 9/11's argued that the treatise may have been the blueprint for 9/11's attacks. Specific paper that read:
The process brings revolutionary change, is like a long one, abstrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor.
Was the 1992 was drafted by Paul Wolfowitz on behalf of then Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney.
American global hegemony.
American Empire, the real consequences of U.S. diplomacy. The great derangement that conspiracy theorists have taken what is written in the paper, and that the repeatedly stated to be a decades-long process to turn the Cold War-era military into a
new
conflicts. He, for evidence of motive, either those would have decided to openly state their objectives, or would have paper in 2000 and quickly laid the groundwork for the 9/11's attacks using it as inspiration. In conspiracy, whether the oil factor and 9/11's provided the United States and the United Kingdom with a reason to launch a war they had wanted for some time, and that this gives them a strong motive for either carrying out the attacks, or allowing it to take place. For instance, von Bülow, a research minister in the German government, has argued 9/11's was staged to justify the subsequent wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Muhammad was quoted as saying that there was the United States could go to war against Muslims. New Main World Order, conspiracy theory. Allies hold that 9/11's was initiated by a disparate variety of banking, corporate, global, and militarists for the purpose of creating a globalist government. Such conspiracy theories predate 9/11 events. Evidence often point to Operation Northwoods as a model for the 9/11 attacks, theorizing the attacks were carried out by the U.S. government as a false flag operation and then blamed on Islamic extremists. Operation implemented, apparently planned by the United States Joint Chiefs of Staff in 1962. One that covered operatives commit multiple acts of terrorism in U.S. cities and blame Cuba, thus providing a pretext for invasion. Time, which inspired past conspiracy theories with those that inspire 9/11's conspiracy theories, such as the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Time of Kennedy. When World Trade Center, witnessed by millions of people and documented by hundreds of videographers, and
there is no determined human being can't find ambiguity in it.
Main 11th movement. Many individuals that support or discuss 9/11's conspiracy theory consider themselves to be part of the 9/11's truth movement. Include, among others, David Ray Griffin, Fizzy Jones, software engineer Jim Hoffman, architect Gerd Gage, Sir Dylan Avery, Governor of Minnesota Jesse Ventura, former of the U.S. House of Representatives Cynthia McKinney, Anil Sunjata, Ed Asner, Eddie Sheen, political Sir Joseph Diafaria, and journalist Thierry Mason. And movement come from diverse social backgrounds. The movement diverse political beliefs, including liberals, conservatives, and libertarians. Among actively discuss and promote such theories are architects and engineers for 9/11's truth, a group that on the collapse of the World Trade Center buildings, 9/11's Truth, 2004, scholar 9/11's Truth, founded in 2005, and for 9/11's Truth and Justice, a group from scholars for 9/11's Truth in 2007 and runs the online publication Journal of 9/11 Studies, not Citizens Watch, which was formed in 2002, and the Historic Victims Group. Several signatures on petitions asking for further investigation of the September 11th attacks. In 2000, John ran for president on a 9/11's Truth platform. Critic Jonathan Kay asserts that for the most part, proponents are not out for financial gain and in some cases have left lucrative careers to become activists. Media. While this series is mainly confined to internet pages, books, documentaries, and conversation, a number of mainstream news outlets around the world have covered the issue. The 2006 Le Monde Diplomatique sparked interest when they ran, on the initiative, a three-page story on the 9/11's attacks and summarized the various types of 9/11's conspiracy theories, which were specifically endorsed by the newspaper, Sensed. The Volt, which position since the September 11th attacks and whose director, Thierry Mason, became proponent of 9/11's conspiracy theory, although the Norwegian version of Le Monde Diplomatique had allowed it to translate and publish this article on its website. The in category refused it this right, thus displaying an open debate between various national editions. In December, the French published an article by Alexander Coburn, Counterpunch, which criticized the alleged endorsement of conspiracy theories by the U.S. left wing, alleged was a sign of also Canadian website for CBC News, the date, titled
Facts Behind the Myths of September 11, 1.
29th, 2, 3, they found may be more surprising than any theories. On November 2009, the Fate aired a documentary entitled The Unofficial Story, where several prominent members of the 9/11's Truth movement made their case. An 20th edition of Time magazine comments that the major 9/11's conspiracy theories depend on circumstantial evidence, without analysis or documentation, quotes context and the scattered testimony of traumatized eyewitnesses, but continued popularity because the idea that there is a malevolent controlling force orchestrating global events is, in a first way, comforting. Theories are part of the process by which Americans deal with traumatic public events and constitute an American form of national mourning. Australia Graph published an article titled
The saints of Iraq were never so clever or devious that they could stage a complex assault on two narrow towers of steel and glass.
And
if all this bad planning, it is watched by a confederacy of dunces.
This group of scientists led by Professor Stephen E. Jones, now covers for 9/11's Truth and Justice.
Most of the instructors at colleges.
The Daily an article in May 2007 that was highly critical of loose change to a move presents a 9/11's conspiracy theory. Doug 8 column for the Arizona Republic wrote that while many
9/11
are not
crazy,
so to take into account both human nature and that nobody has come forward claiming they were participants in the alleged conspiracies. This view was a Calgary op-ed columnist specializing in foreign policy. On 2008, the Finance magazine published a lengthy article on the 9/11's Truth movement and 9/11's conspiracy theories. A British multimedia personality, in 2008 column published by The Guardian as part of its conspiracy theorists fail to take in account human fallacies and added that believing in these theories gives theorists a sense of belonging to a community that shares privileged information, thus giving the theorists a delusional sense of power. The 1,700 online responses, the history of the series. In 9 piece, the Guardian are more supportive of 9/11's conspiracy theories, however, asking,
When did
on 2000, Russian television broadcast in prime time a documentary made by member of the European Parliament Giulietto Chisa entitled Zero, to those who question the accepted account of the attacks according to Chisa. In conjunction with the documentary, Russian television aired a debate on the subject. The panel several countries including 12 Russians who hold divergent views. The motive in broadcasting the documentary was questioned by a commentator from the other Russia who noted that Russian state television had a history of broadcasting programs involving conspiracy theories involving the United States government. Printed by the Pakistan Observer wrote favorably about a 9/11's Truth lecture and film festival held in California and quoted a Jewish speaker at that festival who said that none of the 19 suspected hijackers had been proven guilty of anything and compared racism against Muslims resulting from what he called false accusations to the racism against Jews in the Nazi era. On November 2008, I broadcast a story summarizing various 9/11's conspiracy theories. The in 2009 has led to comparisons between that movement and the 9/11's Truth movement, with seen in a very negative light. Moon landing also been compared to the birther and 9/11's conspiracy theories. James, Journal New York Times, who covered the September 11th attacks, described alignment covering a 9/11's Truth meeting.
Perhaps assignment I have had in recent years.
2009, the National Geographic Channel aired the program 9/11 Science and Conspiracy, in which Genetic Materials Research and Testing Center tested some of the claims frequently made by those who question the accepted 9/11's account. Specifically, this concluded that burning jet fuel alone can sufficiently raise the temperature of a steel support column to the point of structural failure, that a condition using conventional techniques would leave clear evidence that was not found at ground zero, that using thermite is not an effective technique to melt a steel column, and that thermite chemical signatures were found. It would be to tell if thermite was actually used or if the traces came from aluminum with other substances in the fire. The test of hole found at the Pentagon was consistent with the standard scenario, and that damage from a bombing or missile attack would differ from the damage th. In the program, 9/11's conspiracy theorists viewed rough edits of the experiments, and their disagreement with the findings. The British statesman listed David Ray Griffin as the 41st most important person who matters today. The
books on respectability that appeals to people at the highest levels of government.
The public conspiracy theories as
one of myths.
Garber Revisited was chosen by Publishers Weekly as a
pick of the week.
Denver Pub TV has aired 9/11's truth documentaries several times. The station airing these documentaries has been a boon for the station's fundraising efforts. Television and radio host said allegations.
There are aren't there? I mean, thing to believe that our politicians are capable of being Bernie Madoff. It's another 3,000 Americans. Once you territory.
In March, Post editorialized against Yukihisa Fujita, a Japanese politician who has espoused 9/11's conspiracy theories. They described
susceptible fringe.
It was Japan. If Fujita rate these kinds of comments. For the facts, the Egyptian daily Al-Masri Al-Ayyum published an article questioning the U.S. government story and promoting conspiracy theories. The official Al-Aram Center for Political and Strategic Studies and a member of parliament from the Muslim Brotherhood was quoted. Gordon Philology editor for The Age, theorized in a November 2010 column for the Sydney Morning Herald that the popularity of 9/11's conspiracy theories was a result of two main factors. One, revolving rates of the theorists themselves, cynical, and belief for free thinkers. The internet search ranking 9/11's conspiracy theories receive, leading to a false air of authority to the theories. Wrote that
when politics, they feel more threatened, cornered, helpless, and attacked.
Geraldo, the Aldo at Large magazine run by Fox News Channel, expressed towards claims that question the causes of the collapse of 7 World Trade Center. Andrew, a journalist for Fox News and former judge at the New Jersey Superior Court, voiced skepticism about the collapse of the high-rise building, and for investigating the event. Other newsbusters and Media Matters critical comments made by both journalists. Alex radio stations when he began espousing 9/11's conspiracy theories, but by 11 was espousing these and other conspiracy theories on morning TV shows and was the subject of lengthy magazine profiles. On August 2, the BBC Two broadcast a program entitled The Conspiracy Files, 9/10 years on. On 9/11. The Guardian published an article entitled
9/11 Bunked.
The Archives of World Trade Centers 1 and 2. A controlled demolition collapses a building from the bottom and explains that the windows popped because of collapsing floors. The conspiracy theories that claim that World Trade Center 7 was also downed by a controlled demolition, that the Pentagon being hit by a missile, that the highways were packed with explosives and flown by remote control, that Israel behind the attacks, that a plane for the Pentagon was shot down by a missile, that insider trading by people who had foreknowledge of the attacks were all false. Turi Nebula, who had suspicions about the attack on the Pentagon, is one of the MSNBC program The Cycle, which debuted on June 25, 2012. In popular German public broadcaster Ard murder mystery program Tatort ran an episode in which a woman who claims the 9/11 attacks were instigated by the Bush family for oil and power is targeted by FBI and CIA hitmen after her roommate is found dead. The roommate of the 11th hijackers, but behind. Viewed by 7 million people, detectives who were investigating the death believing her story and the woman escaping to an unnamed Arab country. In South Park, the episode 11th conspiracy theories. A main character in the show blames Kroflovsky for causing 9/11s. Kyle and Dan Marsh end up in the White House, where they are. The government did in fact cause the 9/11 attacks. And event revealed that the government wants people to think that caused 9/11s, think the government has more power than it does. A character played by actor Daniel Sunjata, who is a nice conspiracy theorist, explained to a French journalist that the 9/11 attacks were a neoconservative government effort to create a new Pearl Harbor to control oil and increase military spending. Main lines in the first 10 episodes of the show's season 5 revolved around reinvestigation and conspiracy theories surrounding the 9/11 attacks. The plot, The Big Lie, released September 2011, revolves around a scientist going back in time to the day of the attacks with the intention of preventing it, in the finding out that the official story is false. Criticism. Critics say they are a form of conspiracism common throughout history after a traumatic event in which conspiracy theories emerge as a mythic form of explanation. This is the form of research on which the theories are based. An engineer professor at MIT suggests
use that they determine data that doesn't fit their conclusion, their findings as the only possible conclusion.
Eggers by a common stance that the theories are best ignored.
I've told you mainstream, I'll debate.
According to what happened when Steve Jones, a professor at Brigham Young University, took the issue. My right scientific American said
the mistake explained anomalies can undermine a well-established theory lies at the heart of all conspiratorial thinking. All conspiracy falls under the rubric of this fallacy. By noting that scientific theories are not built on single facts alone but on a convergence of evidence assembled from multiple lines of inquiry.
Popular and Dictionary have published articles that rebut various 9/11 conspiracy theories. Pop entitled Debunking 9/11 Myths that expands upon the research first presented in the article. In the McCain wrote that blaming the U.S. government for the events
marched on that day
and
sadness. It should government at a time when that faith is already near an all-time low. It tracks accusations of extraordinary evil against fellow Americans.
dares conspiracy theories as a
panoply,
stating
as their adherents may be, they thought pattern must have great reasons.
In his book The Great Derangement, discusses 9/11's conspiracy theories as symptomatic of what he calls the of American disconnect from reality due to widespread
discuss
the charismatic movement. He argued both
completely idiotic, fanciful, and
in their own lives, while that 9/11's conspiracy theories are different from
Clinton era
and
a small nutcases. They were just seem to be almost you meet.
Use that 9/11's conspiracy theories represent an overly easy target for skeptics and that their criticisms obfuscate the underlying issue of what actually happened if there was not a conspiracy. He suggests negligence on the part of the president and vice president, who were repeatedly warned, followed cover-up conspiracy after 9/11. This columnist Matt Mankello, writing for the online edition of the British Socialist Worker. He concludes, while
desperately in a version of events
and neoconservatives they are trying to take down by creating a diversion. Mankello, many people who are politically left-wing, did column Times, in his book Voodoo Histories, the role of conspiracy theory in shaping modern history that was published in May 2009, the theories strain credulity. Aronovitch's conspiracy theorists have exaggerated the expertise of those supporting their theories, and noted 9/11's conspiracy theorists including David Ray Griffin cross-site each other. Harvey co-authored a 2009 paper which used members of the 9/11's truth movement and others as an examples of people who suffer from crippled epistemologies, to trust and the political system. Undermine democratic debate in extreme cases, they create fuel violence. If government, it should. In Royal Institute of British Architects was criticized for hosting a lecture by Richard Gage, President of Architects and Engineers for 9/11's Truth. Rick Becker of the American Institute of Architects New York chapter, who was 9/11's attacks, said no amount of money would persuade him to allow the group to talk at his headquarters and stated that Gage lacks credibility among the professional community. Uganda, person for the American Institute of Architects, his theories were
ridiculous. There and the bill definitely brought down by the planes.
Was also criticized by the former president of the Royal Institute of British Architects and the founding president of the American Institute of Architects United Kingdom chapter. Gage has against giving a false impression that he has a relationship with them. Agents may seem to intimate that he has an association with them and claimed there were no architects at Architects and Engineers for 9/11's truth screening held in an American Institute of Architects boardroom. The Royal Institute of British Architects released a statement saying the perception that the group endorses events held in its buildings is
regrettable.
On of its Anthony's scathing criticism of many of the above theories in the 11th day, their investigation of the attacks. King, House Homeland Security Committee, said 9/11's conspiracy theorists
trivialize
the
most United States,
and that
graceful, and they themselves.
Anti-theories. In the League, ADL, port attacking.
Hate
That the night about by Israelis and Jews, had the potential to
rational anti-Semitism.
It widely accepted in the Arab and Muslim world, as in Europe and the United States. The
big lie extremists and white supremacists and elements within the Arab and Muslim world.
It asserted the theories were modern manifestation of the 19th century protocols of the elders of Zion, which to map out a Jewish conspiracy for world domination. The AD website as carrying anti-Semitic materials, such as
America's terrorist attacks for their own financial gain and to induce the American people to endorse wars of aggression and genocide on the nations of the Middle East and the theft of their resources for the benefit of Israel.
In former Stephen Dion forced a candidate from Winnipeg, Leslie, to terminate the campaign after earlier writings from Hughes surfaced in which Hughes wrote that U.S., German, Russian intelligence officials knew about the 9/11 attacks in advance. Earlier, Kant, editor of Global Television Network News and Conservative Party candidate in the 2008 Canadian election, had for Hughes's resignation, saying that the 9/11 truth movement is
one of hate-mongering fringe movements
composed of
notorious for holding anti-Semitic views.
On June 29, Hughes sued the Canadian Congress, the Brith of Canada and 4 senior members of the 2 organizations, alleging the anti-Semitic allegations were untrue and defamatory and ruined her career. Later another candidate called for the leader of the New Democratic Party to fire a candidate for her pro-9/11 truth views. The organization, the Islamic Congress, is trying to remove 9/11 conspiracy theorists from the board of the organization, in an what he describes as purifying within and totally Canadianize the organization. In resignation of Richard Falk, the rapporteur on human rights in the Palestinian territories for the United Nations, were placed on his support investigating the validity of 9/11 conspiracy theories. A book by David Ray Griffin. By United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and United States Ambassador to the United Nations Susan Rice. In 9, I'm Fr. a professor of politics at CID Military College in Paris, was by French Defense Minister Hervé Morin for writing a book entitled Chronicle of the Clash of Civilizations that espoused 9/11 conspiracy theories. In Van Jones, and to U.S. President Barack Obama, his signature on a 2004 petition calling for an investigation into whether government officials deliberately allowed the 9/11 attacks to occur, and other controversial statements came to light drawing criticism. Van Jones' campaign, adding that he not currently, nor agreed with that theory. Critic David Aronovich claims the popularity of 9/11 conspiracy theories has hurt the war on terror. According to because a significant portion of educated Pakistanis believe that George W. Bush brought the towers down, the Taliban is difficult because they actually don't believe the fundamental premise on which the war against terror was waged. The became an issue in the 2010 Texas gubernatorial Republican primary when candidate Deborah Medina replied when asked by Glenn Beck about U.S. government involvement in the 9/11 attacks.
I think have been raised in that regard. There are good arguments, and I think American people have not seen all of the evidence there. So I have a position on that.
After remarks by opposing candidates, Medina that she has never been a 9/11 Truth Movement member and believes the Twin Towers were attacked by Muslim terrorists. On 2010, Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad in a speech to the United Nations said that
the as well as and politicians believes within the U.S. government orchestrated the attack to reverse the declining U.S. economy and its grips on the Middle East in order also to save the Zionist regime.
The States delegation as well as others to walk out. U.S. criticized Ahmadinejad's remarks before the United Nations General Assembly on the following day, saying,
for him to excusable,
and
offensive,
and
hateful,
described the 9/11's attacks as a and administration was involved in 9/11's. The Iran claims in 2011 and was criticized in an article appearing Al-Qaeda's magazine. The article jealous of Al-Qaeda. Legal case. Army filed suit claiming that Vice President Dick Cheney, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld and other Bush administration officials orchestrated the 9/11's attacks and the Pentagon was hit by an attack ordered by Cheney. The suit 10 by Judge Denny Chin, who said was
the fantasy.
Her U.S. Court of Appeals, which in April 2010 issued a show cause order why the lawyers and Gallup should not be sanctioned for filing a frivolous lawsuit. The Court of Appeals recused themselves because their emotions made them prejudge the case and abuse their power. On October 2007, the judges sanctioned her lawyers $15,000 each for both the frivolous lawsuits and the accusations of prejudice. Her unfamiliarity with I as part of the 9/11's truth movement. Within a suggestion on an internet chat room suggesting that the collapse of the towers looked like an act of controlled demolition.
If you not one of mentioned anything about the controlled demolition part. I think
the first primarily on various perceived anomalies in the publicly available evidence, and perhaps later developed more specific theories about an alleged plot. One alleged by email and on the web is that not a single Jew had been killed in the attack and that therefore the attacks must have been the work of the Mossad, not Israeli terrorists. The first appeared in Europe. 1 week. The theory by a researcher from the French National Center for Scientific Research published in Le Monde. Other corners of the globe within weeks. 6. Thierry May 9/11's expose l'effroyable imposture topped the French bestseller list. It's as 9/11's, The Big Lie, received attention, but it one of the principal sources for
truth.
2000 of the CIA and September 11 by former German State Minister Andreas von Bülow and Operation 9/11 by the German journalist Gerhard Wisniewski, both books by Matthias Brockers, who was editor at the German news 9/11 Conspiracy Theories. 9/11 are conspiracy theories that disagree with the widely accepted account that the September 11 attacks were perpetrated solely by Al-Qaeda. Detailed advanced knowledge on the part of any government agency. Proponents claim there were inconsistencies in the official conclusions or evidence that was overlooked. In a total of 17 countries, of 1,063 people in 17 nations found majorities in only 9 countries believe Al-Qaeda was behind the attacks. 48 believed Al-Qaeda was responsible for the attacks. 15 believed the U.S. government was responsible, 7 believed Israel was, and another 7% believed some other perpetrator, other than was responsible. The poll were especially likely to name a perpetrator other than Al-Qaeda. The most is that the collapse of the Twin Towers and 7 World Trade Center were the result of a controlled demolition rather than structural failure due to fire. the Pentagon was hit by missile launched by elements from inside the U.S. government, or that a commercial airliner was allowed to do so via an effective stand-down of the American military. Conspiracy theorists for such actions include justifying the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq as well as geostrategic interests in the Middle East, pipeline plans launched in the early 1990s by UNOCL and other oil companies. Other around us paper detailed side. While in Europe, they were treated by the US media with either bafflement or amusement, and dismissed by the US government as the product of anti-Americanism. On November 10, 2001, President George W. Bush denounced the emergence of
outrage, shift the blame away from the terrorists, themselves, away from
the 9 started out mostly in the political left but have broadened into what New York Magazine describes as
terror meet, fuse counter-cultural distrust with the don't tread on me variety.
But conspiracies about the September 11 attacks began to gain ground in the United States. One popularity stemmed more from growing criticism of the Iraq War and the newly re-elected President George W. Bush than from any discovery of new or more compelling evidence or an improvement in the technical quality of the presentation of the theories. Not revelations that weapons of mass destruction did not exist in Iraq, the belief of the President's daily brief of August 6, 2001, and that NORAD had lied to the 9/11 Commission, may have fueled conspiracy theories. Between the anniversary of the September 11 attacks in 2006, main coverage of the conspiracy theories increased. The U.S. issued response listing Corporation, AP, and the Chief of South Korea. U.S. 2009 speech to the Muslim world where he said,
I am aware by the events of 9/11, but killed nearly 3,000 people on that day.
These crashed United Airlines Flight 175 and American Airlines Flight 11 into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, and Kraken Airlines Flight 77 into the Pentagon. These caused the collapse of the Twin Towers and the destruction and damage of other buildings in the World Trade Center complex. The by the impact of the airliner and the resulting fire. The fourth plane into a field near Shanksville, after the passengers and flight crew attempted to regain control of the aircraft. The night included that pre-attack warnings of varying detail of the planned attacks against the United States by Al-Qaeda were ignored due to a lack of communication between various law enforcement and intelligence personnel. For the occasion, the report democratic inertia and laws passed in the 1970s to prevent abuses that caused scandals during that era. The report administrations with
failure.
Since a variety of conspiracy theories have been put forward in websites, books, and many groups 9/11's conspiracy theories identify authorities having advanced knowledge of the attacks and deliberately ignoring or helping to assist the attackers. The standards and technology, NIST, and outlets such as Popular Mechanics have investigated and rejected the claims made by 9/11's conspiracy theories. The CIP accepts that the impacts of jet aircraft at high speeds in combination with subsequent fires, controlled demolition, led to the Twin Towers. 9/11's conspiracy theories, the terms
Main
and all refer to the revelations that the 9/11's Commission report, which integrated intelligence information from the earlier FBI investigation, PEOM, and inquiry of 2002, and the to building performance carried out by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. Investing organizations that support the accepted accounts such as those by the National Fire Protection Association, and scientists of Purdue University and Northwestern University. Articles appearing in magazines such as Popular Mechanics, Scientific American, and Time. Throughout the world, Times of India, the Canadian Casting Corporation, the BBC, and Deutsche, the Australian